Today on the LA Countdown, the podcast, I'm Lucas Servodio and welcome to episode 1. Can you believe that one day we'll be looking back on this day nostalgically from the James Beard Awards? And yes, we'll eventually be escorted out of the ceremony by security for impersonating Bobby Flay, but who cares? It'll be absolutely glorious. On the menu today, I'll give you a little intro to the LA Countdown and what the heck it's all about. I'll then give you some takeaways I've had from the first month of my epic journey to review 100 iconic LA sandwiches in 365 days. And finally, I'll be joined by friend of the Countdown, Cousin Salman, to discuss the recently dropped James Beard Awards semi-finalists. There are a lot of awesome LA restaurants in there, and we'll give them their flowers, but it's really a discussion of why we should even care about these kinds of awards in the first place. So, without further ado, let's chow down. So for those of you who don't know, the LA Countdown is my social media account where I basically just eat a bunch of food. There's a little bit more to it than that though, and I will get into it. But before we do that, I wanted to offer a little window into the origin story of the LA Countdown, how it all began. And essentially it begins where a lot of origin stories begin these days, and that is the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I started working from home, and I found the monotony of it to be quite taxing on my mental health. Just something about the repetitive nature and not having much to look forward to. I knew that it was not a sustainable way for me to live. So at the end of 2020, my girlfriend and I, we sat down and we did one of those journaling exercises where we set goals for the new year. And I wrote down, I want to eat 100 pizzas next year. I didn't really think too much about it. I just knew that pizza is something that brings me joy. I am Italian. I'm not a Guido Italian. Nothing wrong with being a Guido Italian. It's just not me. I am Italian from Italy, from Rome. And like a lot of people, I think pizza is something that just puts a smile on my face. It is a way of life for me. Growing up, we'd have it at least twice a week. My mom would make it on Saturday nights from scratch, and then we would have the leftovers on Sunday night, and both of those meals were the best meals of the week, every week, without fail. So my goal of eating 100 pizzas was really just a way for me to find a little bit of happiness in the midst of all of the darkness of the pandemic. I wrote this in my journal, and I, when it came to actually sharing our goals with each other, my girlfriend and I turn to her and I say, hey, look, I want to do this. And I was expecting her to say, you're insane. Why can't you just be normal? Why don't you just pick up gardening? Why don't you pick up sculpting? Why don't you start a podcast like a true crime podcast or something? But instead, she actually looks at me and says, I think that's a great idea. And not only did she think it was a great idea, she said, I think you should document it on social media. This absolutely blew my mind. First and foremost, it was a blessing to get her permission to do this because she's not the biggest fan of pizza, which I've never understood, but I love her nonetheless. And for her to encourage me to go out and eat pizza was, the be-all, end-all. But then for her to one-up that and encourage me to actually post this on social media, that really took it to the next level, and it got me thinking, wow, that actually sounds like something that would be really, really fun to do. Thus, the LA Pizza Countdown was born. It was just an Instagram account. Basically, the premise was this. Me going around to a bunch of different pizzerias around Los Angeles. I would take a picture of the pizza. I'd review it on stories, and I'd just write a long-ass caption, and that was all she wrote. I went all around the city. I went down to Long Beach to try places like Little Coyote. I was in Santa Monica, hitting up places like that Japanese place, Public Trade, that has since closed. I went to, Hollywood to try Da Michele, Brentwood for Pizzana, just all over the city. And it was just an absolutely incredible experience. Of course, the year came to an end eventually. And I did accomplish the goal of eating 100 pizzas, But the question became, what the heck do I do next? How do I keep this going? So what I did is I actually turned to the community of people that I'd built, the followers, if you will, and I asked them, what do you guys want to see in 2022? And I offered them options like, do you want to see a burrito countdown? Do you want to see an avocado toast countdown, which thankfully nobody took me up on? The winner, it turned out, was taquerias. People wanted to see 100 different taquerias. Now, I love tacos, but I have to say this was a bit more of a daunting journey. I know a lot about pizza. I can talk dough with the best of them. I can talk fermentation. I have an appreciation for different styles, different techniques. But when it came to tacos, I realized I had a ton to learn. However, that ultimately made for a very rewarding countdown. I did so much research. I had to reach out and talk to so many different people to really get a full picture of everything I didn't know, so that I could go out and seek out, okay, these are actually Sonora style tacos. Well, this is actually a Pueblan specialty. Now we're going to dive into the world of barbacoa and learn about all the different types of that. So educationally speaking, it was a fantastic experience. I also realized that it wasn't going to be enough for me to actually just review tacos. I don't think anybody really cares what this one white guy thinks of this one fish taco. It was more important for me to also tell the story of the tacos, of the people, of the taqueros. And so if you go on my Instagram from 2022, you'll notice that there are a lot more interviews with taqueros. And I think that was honestly key to just make the whole thing a bit more watchable for others, and honestly for me too. It was a fantastic countdown. It truly was. I absolutely loved it. We changed the name. It was no longer the LA Pizza Countdown. It became the LA Countdown. And, the year was gangbusters. Did I use that phrase right? I'm not sure. But regardless, it was gangbusters. 2022 came to an end. Once again, we put it up for a vote. What the heck are we doing in 2023? And this time, sandwiches won. Sandwiches edged out burgers by just a hair. And I've got a confession for you all, actually. Burgers were in the lead until pretty late in the game, but my girlfriend actually whipped the votes in order to get sandwiches to win. I know. Some are going to say it's rigged, and you would have a case to make. But ultimately she did that because she thought sandwiches were going to be healthier for me. I think the joke's a little bit on her because in the last 3 days I've had 2 fried chicken sandwiches and a massive pastrami sandwich. So I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be so much better for my cholesterol than burgers. But I do think that this is going to be the best countdown of all time. The best countdown yet. And here's why. There are 4 reasons I am really excited about this countdown. I'm only 6 sandwiches in, so it's early days, but I can already tell that there's 4 reasons that this countdown is going to be the best yet. So first and foremost, sandwiches are a universal medium. There are so many different cultures that have their own sandwich, and not only that have their own sandwich, but that have a sandwich that is essential to their cuisine. Think about the banh mi in Vietnam, the torta in Mexico. There are so many examples of sandwiches like that I think this is going to be by far the most diverse countdown. And in a lot of ways, the most interesting. God bless pizza, God bless tacos, but the former had a lot of Italianness, and the latter, was really a wonderful showcase of everything that Mexico has to offer. But this one is going to be a truly global countdown, and I think it's going to make for some truly incredible content. So look out for that. Secondly, the second reason I'm really excited about the sandwich countdown is that I think the sandwich is probably LA's signature food overall. I'm going to say it. I'm laying a claim. If you think about LA's most iconic dishes, it's oftentimes a sandwich. There's the French dip at Philippe's, there's the number 19 at Langer's, there's the Godmother sandwich at Bay Cities. If you were to make like the Mount Rushmore of LA foods, I think there's a strong case to be made that 3 out of those 5 things could be sandwiches. That might be blasphemy to some, but I just think that there's a strong case to be made. So I think that in and of itself is going to make the sandwich countdown really interesting. And it's also why I've decided I'm not just reviewing sandwich shops this year. I'm reviewing individual iconic or epic sandwiches. And that's a unique twist, which I think is going to actually be very, very helpful for people. Because, I've reviewed pizzerias, I've reviewed taquerias, but maybe you've gone to those pizzerias and you don't know which pizza to order. And maybe you've gone and you ordered a pizza that I didn't have and it wasn't all that good. You don't run that risk this year with a sandwich countdown because I am reviewing individual sandwiches. So if I'm telling you something's good, you know that I'm talking about that exact sandwich and you don't have to, mess around and order something different. That is the signature sandwich. So that is number 2, why I'm really excited about this countdown. Number 3 is that for the first time in countdown history, we are doing ratings. I've never done ratings before. It just wasn't the point of what I was doing. The point was really to just experience some joy selfishly. It was also to get out of the house. It was also to, I think, spread a little bit of positivity. A lot of small businesses had tough times during COVID, so it felt kind of good for me to go out and tell the story of a business that maybe had suffered a bit during COVID or that maybe had popped up over COVID and had eventually become a sustainable business. That's all the countdown was about initially. However, over time, I've learned that people use these recommendations and it's hard for them sometimes to filter between what's actually really good and what's maybe just okay or what maybe is like an interesting story versus just bomb food. And so the rating system is designed to give followers something to really bank on. If I'm reviewing a sandwich and it gets a 96%, then I want you to be able to bank on the fact that it's good. If I am rating a different sandwich and, it's like an 80%, you're not going to walk away disappointed. You knew that you were going to a B- sandwich. So if you went there, it's on you. And maybe you went there because the history of it sounded cool, But the rating system is just supposed to help you, the followers. So, and by the way, let me say, coming up with a rubric for these ratings was not easy. You need to have a good rubric when it comes to rating. I was very worried about getting into a scenario where my rubric just was all out of whack. Like you go to one place and you give it a 95 out of 100, but it turns out you were way too generous so that all of the sandwiches that follow have ridiculously high inflated scores because that first one set like an unreasonably high benchmark. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. I created a really, really in-depth rubric that breaks down the sandwich to its bare elements. 1, bread. B, fillings. 3, construction. 4, the overall experience of the sandwich. And 5, my personal satisfaction. And that's really the wild card. That category is like, how far would I drive for it? How long would I wait in line for it? What kind of crazy things would I do for it? Which family members would I sell for it? Is this a sandwich that I would sell my sister for? Or is it a sandwich I would sell, a distant cousin for? And that would make a difference, right? So that's what the personal satisfaction bucket is about. But all of these things, I think, work together to give a pretty accurate score that you can bank on as the followers. And finally, I'm very excited about this countdown because this year, for the first time ever, we've got a podcast, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to it right now. We're actually going to be accompanying this journey with a podcast. I'll be taking you behind the scenes to give you a bit more of an in-depth look at some of the sandwiches as we go along. If you want to learn more about a sandwich shop, let's say I reviewed Langer's, right? And you were like, damn, the number 19 looks good, but what else do they got? Or what's the story there? I'd love for you to let me know so that I can maybe do like an episode on Langer's, telling its story, telling some fun tidbits, maybe even going into more depth on their menu items. So yeah, and the podcast isn't going to be just sandwiches, by the way. We're going to be doing a lot more things. We're going to be talking about the food news of the day. We're going to be giving our hot takes on food-related cultural items. Like, for example, have you seen The Menu, that new sort of like foodie horror film with Ralph Fiennes and the chess girl? You know the one I'm talking about. We're probably going to review that in the coming weeks and give our hot takes on how stupid that film was, frankly. So that's what the podcast is designed to be. So those are the 4 reasons I am the most excited for the Sandwich Countdown, and I think you should be too. So if you already follow it, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been such an honor to do this, and it's the most rewarding part has been meeting people, meeting the amazing chefs, meeting the amazing taqueros, meeting all of you who are so passionate about food. Honestly, it's scary. Sometimes I'll put a video out there and just like brace because I know that there's going to be criticism, and that's fine. But it's just a testament to how passionate you all are, and I absolutely love that. So thank you for following. If you don't follow, you can find the account on Instagram and TikTok at the LA Countdown. That's TheLaCountDown. Anyways, on to the next section. Okay, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the first ever guest of the LA Countdown, the podcast. It's Cousin Salman. Cousin Saul, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining. I know you had a lot of other stuff going on tonight, but I think it makes sense to maybe just quickly tell the people why you deserve to be here. Why do you deserve to be on this podcast?
Well, the reason why I'm here is fundamentally nepotism. If you couldn't tell by the way you address me, there's not really. I have not eaten 100 pizzas in one place in a year or any good stuff like that. I am just a food appreciator, someone whose actual food appreciation of finding and eating great foods was developed by you. But
You're welcome.
Honestly, thank you. And no, we were former roommates. We worked together way back when. And for some reason, you decided to drag me along as Cousin Salman, and I'm here to enjoy. I will say, though, I think the value I bring here is I don't know if folks can tell by watching Luca's videos, but he has too many enablers in his life, I would say. Too many people who are supportive, see him as a high value opinion and character, and I like to cut you back down to earth.
Yeah, you're basically my Steve Bannon, is what you're saying.
Is that what Steve Bannon did? I'm not so sure. I feel like Steve Bannon went in the other direction with his charges. So
yeah, you're probably right. But we don't need to get into that. I mean, look, the reason I have you on here is really, I need somebody to keep me honest. And also, I think occasionally, by accident, you have some pretty good food takes. So I think you've got some pretty good taste.
I have a naturally talented palate. I like to bring that to my everyday life. And no, I mean, in all seriousness, I really enjoy exploring new food options. You know how much I enjoy finding new restaurants and new places, and I think I bring a good take, though I have no professional experience or background. But that's not the point here, is it?
No, it's not. But it is a little bit, actually, and here's why. As I've promised the listeners up to this point, is I would love to spend time on this podcast talking about food news and really the media environment around food, and sort of like, it's kind of like a bonkers world out there, the whole food media industrial complex. And I think you actually, so you do have a little bit of background in media, don't you?
I do. That is true. Both professionally and I would also say as a personal interest. I am a ravenous consumer of content, of food media, and have a lot of thoughts on how food is discussed and what we talk about when we talk about food. And of course, professionally, I have guided various important organizations through media crises in the past, including the LA Countdown itself.
Yeah, no, you are my first call when it comes to crisis comms, which happens with surprising regularity.
I wouldn't call it so surprising, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for such a problematic account like the LA Countdown. Uh, so speaking of problematic entities, I wanted to start this discussion by talking about some of the hottest news that dropped this week in the food world, and that is the announcement of the new James Beard Awards semifinalists. Did you catch this?
I did indeed.
Well, it's kind of so. Yeah, for those who don't know, James Beard Awards are like the Oscars of the food world. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say so. Between them and Michelin, there's some mix of Golden Globes and Oscars in there. There's equivalence. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's actually a good comp because Michelin is more global, so therefore it's like the
Mhm.
Oscars. I guess, yeah, the James Beard Awards is limited to the United States, so it's like the national Oscars, you might say, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a fundamental question here, which is, do we care about the James Beard Awards?
You know, we've talked about food awards in the past and the you know the value of them and such. I'm actually gonna and we've been quite cynical about them. I think we a little bit should. We should care. We should care less than we've typically cared about awards. And I do think across the board, whether we're talking about Oscars or food or whatever, people care less and less about the official sort of establishment awarding of certain restaurants and restaurateurs or movies and creators. But I found actually looking through the James Beard list why I personally care about them, which is that yeah, look, they got some old standbys here and there, but looking across, for example, the Seattle nominees, which is where I live, I was like, oh shoot, there are some interesting folks who I've not heard of here who have gotten a little bit of shine due to, I should say, the more modern take on the James Beard Awards and some of the work they've done to maybe expand their perspective. And I think that's valuable in some way to
So,
get some perspective on it.
So you bring up a really interesting point, right? Which is, I think, the criticism that a lot of these awards come under, and it's one of gatekeeping, right? It's one of
Mhm.
basically like these awards exist to just elevate people who basically already have platforms,
Right.
and give them their shine while sort of creating this environment where just the rich get richer.
Yeah.
Um, but you feel like they're doing something different here.
I think so. Looking at this list, and of course with some awareness that you could possibly speak to of the work James Beard has done to sort of expand their purview, I'm looking at this list, and there are restaurateurs and chefs who I know for a fact that even in Seattle have a relatively limited profile who are getting some recognition here, and I think that's valuable in some ways. Now, there's like, of course, the ways in which that these folks are. Chosen and what it means for folks who are not chosen who may be very much deserving is a challenge for any sort of awarding entity, but I was like kind of appreciative of what I saw when I looked at the list closely and in terms of like the breadth of folks that in Seattle and beyond who might be exposed to small emerging chefs and restaurants that they might not have considered otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say the same thing about the LA list.
Mm,
Or the LA winners. I feel like there's maybe one person in Los Angeles that I hadn't heard of.
mm,
Everyone else, and look, I have to say, like, all of the restaurants that were nominated either for Best Chef California or Outstanding Restaurateur,
mhm.
Best New Restaurant, like, they're all extremely deserving places. There's not like one place I would look at and say, nah, that ain't it, you know?
Right, right.
But it's more so just like, I don't know. I don't think these are actually awards for people in Los Angeles to
Yeah.
care about. Like anybody who knows restaurants in Los Angeles or anybody who doesn't even, I think, but just like has looked on Yelp for somewhere good to eat, you've heard of 90% of these restaurants already. Like this is not a mechanism to discover new restaurants. And maybe that's not necessarily the point, but it does seem to be one of the advantages or one of the benefits that you're outlining. if I'm not mistaken.
No, I think that's right. And it actually, I mean, it's a second question, right? You asked me why should we care, and I was like, well, we should care because we maybe get to learn, like get to know some new places, get to know some new restaurants and restaurateurs, and there's some value in that. Of course, I want to dig more deeply into your take in Los Angeles, but the the reason of why they exist is different, right? Why should we
Yeah.
care? One thing. Why should they exist is a different question. So and I don't know if I know the answer to that beyond let's get some eyeballs to James Beard and Eater, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
a media in some way in this like is a self-perpetuating sort of entity, right?
Right.
There's really no point except to pat themselves have media pat restaurants on the back, pat themselves on the back, get some more attention to that particular brand. But I mean, yeah, and I don't know the perfect answer to that generally, but I think in general, there's so many restaurants out there, so many movies, so many TV shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is, I think, some sort of value to having someone, we might argue over who, help sort of determine where people looking for the highest quality stuff should look.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for people outside that to say, you know what, you're actually missing quite a few things
Well, and that comes back to like what is the role of the restaurant critic, right? Like
here.
I feel like initially when restaurant criticism started, and I actually don't know this, so I'm going to speak out of my ass for a moment, but I feel like I am surmising that when restaurant criticism began, the point was to like let readers know, like it was literally to inform readers about whether a place was good or not. Literally that simple. It was like, hey, this new place opened. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't. And it's almost like a tool, like a roadmap for people looking to like go out to dinner. And also, I feel like it probably started in an era where like that was like really vile information to have because people were on more limited budgets. They weren't like eating out as much. So like you really wanted to be sure if you're going to like one of the expensive restaurants in town, you're like you're going to one that has a good rating in like the local Times, whatever, right? But nowadays, I feel like the the food media that exists, like it should be at its ideal something that people can use, right? Like I don't know if I feel like the articles that I would imagine drive the most clicks are ones that are like, oh, 17 new places where you can swish meat and shabu shabu, that kind of
Right.
thing. Um, and I feel like people go to those because they are literally like looking for a shabu shabu spot and they want to know which one is like quote unquote approved.
That's right. I do think over time, as food media has had to evolve to frankly reach audiences, they become much more niche and specific in terms of what their recommendations have to offer to the potential eater. And I'll go back and I mean, feel free to cut this out, but to get real nerdy about it for a second, I imagine the reason that restaurant criticism began really is because media outlets felt that it was something that readers would want to buy and read, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a fundamental financial motive there, and also potentially, and again, let's speak out of our ass. There's a almost local marketing or local business value to it. I'm going to hypothesize that even like local chambers of commerce might have supported or pushed for something
Local
like
chambers of commerce. Now
oh
you're
yeah,
now you're out of
yeah, yeah,
pocket. Now
oh
you're
yeah,
out of
yeah.
pocket.
But it makes sense, right? When people didn't have Yelp or didn't have a way to understand where to go and how to spend their money in a city, right? Like the part of the thing that something that local media brings is some direction in that regard. So and of course, since then, since the New York Times critic or local critic, and with the rest of media evolution has happened, the conversations and the structure with which recommendations happen and the way they're provided has changed a lot, exactly in the way that you're saying. I think
Yeah.
people are, and look, we're speaking, let's say, for our specific demographic to some extent, but people are
Yeah.
curious about the best things in their neighborhood and have a tool in the internet to go find what they might think is the very best option.
Yeah.
And so the infatuation emerges, Eater emerges, and they provide much more tailored recommendations. Now, of course, there's a whole conversation to have as to how effective they are even doing that, right?
Yeah,
But
and the other sort of problems it creates, right? Like for example, like I feel like it's always the same spots that get written
yeah.
up, and it's like it. I actually wanted to do like a series on social media, which was called like the restaurant next door, which is basically like, okay, yeah, Evan Funky, the legendary Evan Funke, I say tongue in cheek, opened up Mother Wolf in Hollywood, right? And it got like absolutely every single newspaper review, every like, infatuation was like, you got to go there. Every blogger was like super buzzy about it. What about the like little shop that's like a block down that's been there for like, I don't know, not even like 50 years, but like 7 years, that maybe
Yep.
like maybe it was like had like a little bit of buzz about it and like has just continued consistently for like 7 years. I kind of like feel like those are the places that really get slept on. It's not like the historic institution or the old ones or like the buzzy new ones. It's kind of the ones that are just like doing it day in, day out. And I feel like there's an injustice to that. That's like perpetuated by this, like, I don't know, like it's almost like a race to cover the buzziest restaurant at every
Yeah, yeah.
publication.
Yeah, yeah, hottest new restaurants and so on. It's funny. You named a specific outlet in your preview for this podcast, and I won't rename it here. But the when I first got to Seattle, I noticed that that outlet, which is a very popular mainstream outlet, had one reporter here in Seattle. Shout out to
Look, we can name
wait,
names.
we can name it? Okay.
We're talking
The
about the infatuation. Yeah, yeah.
And shout out to Amy Rizzo, who's been holding it down for the infatuation Seattle for years since I've been here. But I did notice, and to Amy's credit, and like she's, I think, really done a great job keeping up with evolving trends, finding old places. But she was the only writer for the Infatuation Seattle, and so when I was looking at the Infatuation's various lists, where to go on a first date, where to take your family, quiet night out, I was like,
Those are pretty different needs, my dude.
pretty different needs and pretty similar restaurants across each list. I was like, I think Amy likes like 12 good restaurants in Seattle. Just trying to find different ways. And again, she's like literally like the face of the infatuation in Seattle and kills it. But that was a perfect example of like, damn, young people reading the infatuation are going to be continually drawn to basically the same 15 places over and over again. And I would, coming from LA, where Jonathan Gold, rest in peace, was still writing stuff by the time I left.
Yeah.
There was a real gap, and I think he's someone who like we're kind of drawing around this conversation, who would go to the restaurant next door and actually assess it and actually try to, look away from the spotlight and see what's hiding.
Yeah, I mean,
that's there to be found.
That's exactly right. He was like the OG of that, right? Where like at a time when restaurant critics were just writing up the like new Daniel Boulud restaurant or something, he was literally going to the strip mall in the San Gabriel Valley to review like a wide noodle place, right? So and unfortunately though, I feel like a lot of places try to do that, but still it becomes this like almost like echo chamber where they're just reviewing the same noodle shop, and then this one noodle shop takes off and there are like 14 noodle shops around it that like are probably just as good, but they just don't have that like seal of approval, from like it's I don't know if there's a fix to this. I think it's just basically, you know what, there are a lot of like influencers out there, shout out my fellow influencers, like who are honestly do God's work in this way, because a lot of them like may live in these neighborhoods and they've been going to these places for years and they'll post about them. I feel like it would be great if we could move into that more of like an organic direction, just like going off of like the places you stumble upon, more like there's a certain romance missing from like the current like the state of food media that you come across. It just feels like all of the restaurants that are in there are predetermined.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, it makes sense in a way, right? Going to a new place, putting your cosign on a new place is risk, right? It's risky. It's risky both in terms of the eyeballs you draw and also you put your brand on the line for a specific restaurant. So it makes total sense that like different outlets are going to wait and see who cosigns what and follow suit, so they know that they're kind of all on the same page and not stepping out of line or getting criticized for making a bad recommendation, whatever it may be. I will say I want to pause here for a second and kind of turn the spotlight right onto you.
No,
we're talking about restaurant criticism as some abstract thing, but if I'm not mistaken, the LA Countdown goes around eating sandwiches and kind of rating how good the LA Countdown, the conceptual entity, how good it thinks those sandwiches are. So
Yeah,
I haven't
yeah.
heard your intro yet, but I'm curious, given this environment, given the critiques you're making, how is what you're going to do, or how is what you're doing different in any way?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying I'm not part of the problem, and that is definitely like the first step to change is acceptance, right? But I feel like I don't know. I feel like I still feel like me and other like Instagrammers and TikTokers that I follow, like Forking Around or Fat Fuck or a number of other folks, like we I don't really consider us having like a place of authority. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have like opinions, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my ratings are really just a way to like quantify my opinions. And I feel like that was more so born out of like people asking for it as opposed to like something that I even wanted to do,
Well,
like
that's
people
okay. Go, keep going.
I was gonna say, like, it's really like I was finding that people were like, "Oh, that place looks really good," but then they DM me and be like, "How good was it actually?" Because clearly, like, you know, you could never like. There are some influencers out there who like post videos and like no matter what they're eating, they could be eating like a sandwich with a sock in it. They're like their eyes roll back in their heads like they're experiencing the purest bliss they've ever experienced. And I feel like that is a separate problem where it creates an environment where you don't know who you can trust. And so that's why I did ratings. I feel like that's why someone like Rick Locks does ratings. Shout out Rick. And I find there's a real benefit to that. But it's funny you say that because on the flip side, the LA Times doesn't do ratings.
Hmm.
They don't give stars. I don't think. I think maybe they did at one point, but like Bill Addison, the restaurant critic, doesn't give stars. Like,
Right.
which is it's like them writing about it is the endorsement.
Yeah, yeah, and same thing with Eater, right? Eater doesn't give ratings, and the infatuation. I actually remember famously saying at one point they were going to stop doing ratings. However, I think they went back to them
Yeah, they
because
do.
what you said is really interesting, right? There could be a flip here. The audience asked you to do ratings, right? And it was so funny when you were like, "Oh, I'm not in a position of power, but I just like quantify my opinion with rating numbers," and that's what the New York Times does for the reports our system and so on. But the point is the underlying thing there is that's what audiences want. That's what consumers
Yeah,
want, and so maybe the issue isn't with food media, but with the way that we eat and engage with food in our communities, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that like the mindset of an American consumer, which is not an unfair mindset to be clear, but the way like the competitive slash ranking nature that we as viewers, eaters of food and viewers of movies and readers of books demand knowing what's best so we know how to spend our time and money drives maybe in some ways the lack of what you were calling magic or authenticity
yeah,
in the way these things are looked at.
dude, it's true. I mean, obviously consumers play a part. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I mean, I think about like there's just something like that happens in your brain chemistry when you're having like an In-N-Out burger versus like a Jack in the Box burger. It's like fundamentally very similar ingredients. Obviously preparation is different and whatnot, and we can get into the nuances, but the branding and the cachet and whatnot is so much different. You might even enjoy a Jack in the Box burger more than an In-N-Out burger, but you're never gonna post that shit on Instagram. Do you know what I mean? Like you're never gonna like take a selfie with like a patty melt from like Jack in the Box in the drive-through and be like, California, baby. Like that's just not it's not going to happen. And that's because the branding of In-N-Out is so strong. And I feel like that's the same deal for a lot of these like quote unquote hot new restaurants. Like, I'm much more likely to take a picture of myself at Pija Palace, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like kind of like a cool place to be seen. Something happens in my brain when I'm having that food because like, I feel validated because I am there. Versus if I'm just like at All India Cafe, excellent Indian restaurant in Glendale, right? I might not Instagram that because it's just not as sexy.
Is this a bad time to announce my new platform, the Jack in the Box 100, where I go to the 100? um,
It's a
Yeah,
perfect
no,
time. Perfect time.
no,
Everyone ends with, and I can confirm that was indeed a Jack in the Box.
yeah, no, I mean, and look, I'm not sure what all more to say aside from I don't even know if it's really a vicious cycle, and I do think the process that everyone from Top Chef to James Beard to Eater has gone through about trying to push themselves to be more, I don't know, expansive in what they're looking at, what they're looking for, more I think accepting of different kinds of new cuisines, something that they should have been doing for years, especially once Jonathan Gold pioneered the process of doing so. Everyone used to talk about Jonathan Gold as if he was some unicorn and as if they couldn't do the same things where
Yeah.
they were at, right? And it seems like the tide is shifting in some way. Now, I don't know if that means that these awards and what it means to chase these awards, and I've listened to, I know you have too, listened to restaurateurs and chefs speak about how much pressure and how sort of negative and demanding the awards environment is for them, particularly
Yeah.
around Michelin stars. Like, I don't know if there's a way to stop that particular cyclone beyond consumers, as we get more educated and learn more and hopefully get to I think the fundamental shift would have to come at the consumer level before the media level. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's a tough one, man. I don't think it's our job here to fix this right now, but certainly by episode 50 of the podcast, we will have solved it, and that is a promise to everybody out there. Yeah.
In conclusion, fuck James Beard. Fuck James Beard. Yeah.
well, no, that was my question. Is like, where do we land on James Beard? Because we've been talking a lot about the food media, but like James Beard isn't food media. They're a foundation, technically. Like.
Yeah.
They're doing something a little bit different. Now, a lot of the incentives are the same. They are using their platform to sell sponsorships, like it's, I don't know who the hell is sponsoring the James Beard Awards these days, but it's probably like Capital One or something like that, And so like, it's all about like, there is an industry to it. Right. But there is something slightly different. To me, I feel like the James Beard Awards, where it shines is the fact that it's an industry title, right? And to the extent you can have an impact in like helping a restaurant and giving it its recognition for its longstanding service to the industry in some way, I think there's a value there. I just think it's not all that's happening, if that makes sense.
Well, and I know, like, I think we're gonna transition this conversation soon, but you made a great point. They're a philanthropy, right? And so, what are the awards? The awards are fundamentally a marketing tool for the philanthropy, right? To raise that philanthropy's profile. Why is it called the fucking Michelin Guide? It's because Michelin Tires wanted to create a guide to tell people how far they should travel to restaurants that are good, right? And it's one out of the thing. And so, I mean, to the question of why these things exist and why should we care, they were at the beginning. They were, essentially marketing tools, brand building tools that are now things that dictate an industry and how we feel about the people in that industry. And maybe they shouldn't be, because I don't know if you can separate that fundamental purpose from why they began and why they started to how they function today, no matter how hard they try. And maybe the countdowns, the influencers, and the, hopefully, knock on wood, future Jonathan Golds of the world will be who I think come from maybe a pure place in terms of what they look for, what they find, and how they communicate to people about what to appreciate will emerge more and more. But it remains to be seen.
Well, with that in mind, I do want to give flowers to some of the recipients, the LA recipients of the James Beard Awards that were announced, and a couple of which I know you've been to. So I wanted to just say their names and get a quick reaction from you of what you thought of that restaurant. One is Moo's Craft Barbecue.
Best of the best. They're the one. I hope so. I believe this is a semifinalist list. They should end up at the top of it as a winner at the very end. The very best taco I had last year during your taco countdown. They by the way, and I know you know this, but a neighbor, I believe a couple or a couple of residents of Lincoln Heights neighborhood who came back, built the restaurant in the space, and are the best at doing what they do, they are everything that a list like this should be finding. Now, of course, to our point earlier, Moosecraft has been well recognized already, including by Michelin. So
Yeah.
not exactly like a big discovery by James Beard to put them here. And frankly, if they had been really doing their homework, Moosecraft would have been on this list 5 years ago.
Well, that
But
would have been okay. That's too soon, bro. They were like they were like a
we knew about Moosecraft. We knew. I was following Moosecraft on Instagram 5 years ago, no problem.
we went to their pop up at a brewery, my dude. Like that's different. You know?
Well,
I feel like
but is it right to your very point? Someone is eating that food and recognizing how good it is. It's just as good. I mean, look, it might be a little bit better now, but it was amazing then. It was Michelin ready on that day in 2016 or whatever we had. And it's a shame that it took so long and took someone to take I don't know who did it first, but took a little while for people to make the bet on putting their stamp on Moosecraft as a great place before they get this national recognition. Damn, they were doing the thing back then.
yeah. No, and look, actually Moosecraft I think is one of the like more timely choices because I think their brick and mortar opened last year? Like
2 years,
2
last
years
year,
ago?
2 years, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these other restaurants, I've said this before, but it feels like giving Scorsese the Oscar for The Aviator. You know, it's like they're they're only now recognizing Holbox, which has been making some of the best shrimp tacos in Los Angeles, or not just shrimp, but fish and seafood tacos for I want to say a decade. You know, I mean, Best Chef California. Jazz from Jitlada is on here. Like, how has she not been on here
Wait.
before? You know?
Well, I'll give you a quick fact check, which you may be able to edit, but it's possible that these restaurants have been semifinalists in the past.
Fair enough.
Right? And and they're coming back around.
That's
But
fair
you're
enough.
exactly yeah. And I would be curious to see like how that's evolved over time. But to loop back, I mean, whether it's Jitlada or Moosecraft or Holbox, can you like what we would have missed if Moosecraft had not been able to, for whatever reason, get their brick and mortar, or who had been shut down by COVID without getting the necessary recognition from the people who dictate tastes in this industry, right?
Yeah.
You would have lost some of the best barbecue in California, possibly the country, because of that. And that's the power that this industry has, and that's why it's so important that they, I don't know, do the work that needs to be done to make sure they're exploring beyond just, as you were saying, the Martin Scorsese's doing The Aviator.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Okay, next restaurant I want to bring to your attention. I genuinely think you haven't been to any others, so which is actually like an indictment on me. I need to bring you to more places. But Pija Palace for best new restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I mean, look, that one feels a little. I mean, look, we went to Pija Palace. I liked Pija Palace. It's having
wait for the listeners at home who maybe live under a rock and don't know what Pija Palace is. Can you give a quick breakdown of what it is?
Pija Palace is a beautiful concept of a sports bar that serves essentially fusion Indian Italian, would you call it, or Indian bar food cuisine? You know the combo better.
Yeah, I think Indian Italian is because their signature dishes are really pizzas and pastas. I think Indian Italian would be the best way to say it.
And they do. I mean, look, some dishes really, really hit. Some are, more misses. And I don't know. It's a funny look. I don't know where the tipping point happens for places like this. But if Pija Palace hadn't quite been in the location it's at, or had the branding it has, or a couple really good Instagrammable dishes, it's just possible that it would have been a mediocre place in another context. That's my opinion. If Pija Palace opened in Seattle, for example, in some like lush or known neighborhood, I don't know if it gets the shine it does. So seeing it here, I'm very happy for it. Very unique concept, great place to go and watch a baseball game. But I feel like that inclusion is more flavor of the year kind of inclusion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really like Pija Palace. I reviewed it last year. Kind of as a one-off, honestly, because I wasn't doing the pizza countdown anymore. But I really like their dishes. I really like the concept. I agree with you. There are some misses. I think it deserves the nod for best new restaurant. The thing is, like, if this were just like an LA list, best new restaurant, I would be like, duh, you got to include Pija Palace. This is best new restaurants in the country.
Yeah.
And to me, I struggle I struggle to believe that there aren't like, 15 better new restaurants out there, but because Pizza Palace has had such truly, it's been like the press darling.
Yes.
It's been like, the Joel Embiid of of restaurants in LA this year and nationally, frankly. I feel like maybe it wouldn't have made it if it
I,
weren't
I,
for
I
that.
I think, hey, look, we went to Camp Social House in Seattle for dinner one night. I would be willing to bet Camp Social House makes better food and just as good of an environment as Pizza Palace. But it's
Cat
not in Silver.
Yeah,
Camp Social. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's not in Silver Lake. It's
Not in
not in
Silver
Silver
Lake.
Lake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you don't have a bunch of nepo babies going there
yeah.
after their Erewhon run.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry to any nepo babies out there. You're a valued Countdown listener as well. Yeah, man. Well, that was a pretty comprehensive take on the James. I'm not sure we really like figured out the James Beard Awards, but you know what? We can revisit this conversation after they put out their next list.
I would like to. I feel like we should start doing more homework before our before these podcasts
Dude,
because
we really Joe Rogan did today.
oh yeah, oh for sure. We
Yeah.
need to get a fact checker, man. We gotta get like a Gen Z fact checker who can just like Google stuff as we're talking and tell us how we're wrong in real time. Uh,
But it's also almost like a pop quiz for listeners, like if we made mistakes, please drop it in the content in the comments. So yeah. Anyways, I actually wanted to do finish this off with a quick game that I'm going to catch you by surprise with this one, but it's a quick
all right.
game that I'd like to start instituting, and it's called Over Under, which is really just overrated or underrated. I'm just going to quick fire you some things, and you have to tell me if it's overrated or underrated, and you can elaborate on it if you wish.
Okay.
Okay, first thing, tinned fish.
Underrated. Underrated. People think I think that is like a high end like grocery store product that people haven't realized how delicious, nutritious, and versatile it is. Tinned fish is, I think, on the cusp of being really discovered more broadly.
Okay, I like that take. Handmade pasta.
Overrated. Not worth the effort quite. No, well, let me say homemade handmade pasta overrated. You and your fiance got me a wonderful cookbook and pasta press for my birthday a couple years ago. Admittedly, I've tried to make pasta once, did not go great. It's supposed to be really easy. I would say overrated. What makes pasta, you're gonna kill me for this. What
Oh
really makes
God!
pasta, in my opinion, I'm a sauce boy. Don't worry
Wow.
about the handmade. Don't worry about your al dente. Whatever. Like cook your pasta right. Get a box. What is like Bristol's or some shit. Get it from the grocery store and make a beautiful sauce, and you're just fine.
So basically are you a ragu boy?
No ragu, sure, but put a little flavor on that, man. Like mess around, throw some fresh garlic in there, put some red chili flakes, mess around, do it right. Cook your pasta, then pour it into the saucepan separately. Make sure it gets coated. That's what makes your good homemade pasta.
This was absolute blasphemy. I'm gonna have to scrub this out. Uh, okay, that's interesting. And my final question for you: Seattle restaurants, overrated, underrated?
Ooh, that you mean at like a national level?
No, I mean like yeah, like what is
Like
the
people looking at Seattle being like that place has good food, or people in Seattle being like, oh, we have great food.
I think as best you can, a mix of both. Sort of like what is the perception of Seattle food scene, both within and nationally?
I'm gonna go. Shoot, I think I'm gonna go mildly underrated. Mildly
Wow,
underrated.
I did not
Yeah.
expect that from
No,
you.
my first instinct was overrated. I do think there's been, and I think when I got here, especially, I should say this: 2017, when I got here, I would go highly overrated. I was pretty disappointed in when coming over from Los Angeles, which is like look, a tough comparison. LA is like an international, like huge city. Seattle's a bit smaller, but I was disappointed with the options here when I first arrived. I do think in the last several years, for whatever reason, including through COVID, Seattle's had a little influx of great chefs, great restaurants, great restaurant concepts, which both by, I mean, very, very mildly by James Beard, but increasingly by local reviewers and influencers, have been getting recognition that is warranted. And I think your Camp Social houses. There's a really great, and I can't remember its name off the top of my head, Turkish restaurant that just opened out here. I think in Ballard. That was initially a pop-up, and that's like a really special place. We got Kenji Lopez all holding it down here in the city now, finding new places, finding great places, and pointing them out to folks. Honestly, he might be a huge part of this, and as more people hopefully continue to follow him and learn from him, I think he's someone, and especially who's opened my eyes to the value of Seattle cuisine. So I'm gonna go mildly underrated.
Okay, well that was a controversial answer, but we'll accept it. You win the game. Congratulations.
Oh, hell yeah.
All right, well, Cousin Saul, thank you for joining. We might have you back on. We don't know yet. We'll have to evaluate this performance and then go from there.
Hey, look, give me a James Beard Award for the podcast already. I'm here for it.
All right, man, take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
So that's a wrap, folks. The first episode of the LA Countdown, the podcast, in the books. Thanks to our guest today, Cousin Saul Mon. Thank you for listening. And if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe and rate us on Spotify. Also, if you have any ideas of the kinds of topics you'd like for us to cover or the guests you'd like to see come on, please hit me in my DMs on TikTok or Instagram at the LA Countdown. That's TheLACountdown. Thanks as always. That's all for today. Countdown out.